During the 1990s, the West was under the impression that it was on the brink of a great era of peace, where everything bad about humanity would be done away with, and we would ease into a destiny of freedom and abundance. Today, new wars seem to start every year, and everything seems to be getting more expensive, if it's up for ownership at all. We are, so we are told, free, but our actual space to live and think in is very limited. We are a global society, with no access to a new frontier, and so every attempted improvement is construed as a power grab over the existing order, rather than as a wish to try something new. The world outside of social conventions, for all we care, does not exist, and stating that things can actually be true in a holistic way, beyond the context of society here and now, is frowned upon. Things of beauty and universal appeal are pathologically replaced with the emotionally blunt or the intentionally ugly. Art has been reduced to its impulsive quality, leaving all semblance of subtlety behind. Therapy has been reduced to acceptance, abandoning the notion of bettering oneself and denying any purpose to shame or regret. Conscience, now, is seen as something random or individual, with no application on the lives of others, while humanity is seen as a blight on the earth, rather than as the purveyor of imagination, and life's best chance to expand into the cosmos. The question arises, how did we get here? Why did our prosperity lead to such antipathy and carelessness? The answers in this video may surprise you. Talking about the emergence of decadence, it's essential we start with what it's like to be born just before the fall. Typically, we find ourselves in an age of progress or expansion. Some great enemy has been defeated, or a new technology put to use, and life starts to get a little easier than it used to be. Things get so much easier, in fact, that people change their fundamental outlook on life. Where before you would have lived in service to the people around you, you are now thought of as living selfishly, for to be born into such prosperity is surely a privilege. Traditionally, the reason for you being here would be with your parents, and their need for someone who could take care of them in their old age. Now though, life gets to be easy enough that your parents feel they don't need anyone. Life is something they give to you, for your benefit, and their raising you is a sort of way of proving how selfless they are. Truth is, though, that that's all in their heads, and actually you are still born as a gift, because others were wanting. You weren't in some worse off place before this. You weren't anywhere. You are on account of your mother and father, as they could not feel personally whole without having you, no matter if they recognize this or not. You, fundamentally, are here because you have something to offer, and deep down you expect that the people who raised you appreciate this. An expectation in which you are quite justified. People, however, tend to struggle to admit to selfish choices if they can avoid it, and so your parents, given the chance, will say that they were only ever altruistic, that your conception was something you received, and that you should develop yourself and flourish now just for you, without any humility on their part. That's not how human nature works though. If you arrive somewhere for the benefit of other people, to be something to them, and they just tell you they're fine or satisfied already, you're not going to do too well. In fact, you're going to feel like you're not what they were looking for, like you're a mistake, and no amount of be yourself or we accept you is going to fix that. Chances are you'll think of leaving again, and if you don't, then the mission ahead is quite clear, proving yourself. You get career obsessed, or maybe you take on a different identity from the way you're perceived. Anything to be subversive and to show that there is more to you than this person whom no one seems to be interested in. If you have children of your own, furthermore, chances are you'll have a similar attitude to the one your parents did, if not a worse one. Your own parenthood, after all, will likely become something that has to be perfect, in which you try to show that you can provide anything that might be wanted for. You'll find yourself being unable to say no, or longing for an exhaustive manual to something that came quite naturally to countless generations before you. Also that you will finally have a relationship with someone where you are the one person making their life whole. Your children, though, sadly, will in their being raised this way become part of a generation which can only be described as dysfunctional. They will suffer from a chronic anxiety as to what their situation is asking of them, or they will get depressed, thinking that they are not needed at all, or they will get aggressive, thinking that people should just admit to what they need from them, instead of treating them like objects of charity. Society, at this point, will be without any of the understanding required to deal with these issues, conceiving of troubled people only in terms of what should be given to them, and not in terms of what they have to offer. The best it can do, without developing a sense of humility after all, is to insist as if it were all that mattered on equality, and the idea that everyone has just as much to offer as everyone else does, such that no one really needs to prove themselves, and stability might be maintained. This hypervaluation of equality is dogmatic, though, and the dynamics which tend to follow from it end up being quite toxic. If one person seems like they have more to offer, now, that surplus must be on account of their having been helped in some way, or society has overvalued them. If you feel you have any extra need of them, then in accordance with equality you have to reduce or belittle them first, or else deny your need until you can't help but sate it with bad stuff like porn or junk food. We end up consuming so much bad stuff, in fact, that we start to think of ourselves as being inherently evil, or of good and evil as not existing at all. We've left God far behind at this point, having felt uncomfortable with the notion of any entity having more to offer than we do, never mind an omnipotent one, and so we fall prey to totalitarianism, to ideologies that say we can at least do good by recognizing our evil nature and letting ourselves get repressed for it. Birth rates plummet, reality becomes something that people are disinterested in, and the old society, which the young never felt seen by anyway, collapses under its own weight, leaving its elderly ruling class, the same generation who started this decline, embittered and fatalistic. There will have been people who went back to question equality as a dogma, or who never accepted it at all. People who had a wish to prove themselves and the possibility that there was more to life. Such proofs require space, though, room to show oneself in, and that room is not easily found. Most likely, therefore, this movement, in attempting to gain independence from the rest of society, spirals into violence, trying to create space through the removal of other people, but only ending up giving everyone who tries to think beyond equality a terrible name. Sadly, for indeed the finding of new space or a new frontier is always possible, and may well be decadence's antidote. New forms of government might be attempted there, new ways of life developed, and fundamentally the new world will force the old one to acknowledge that its borders are not those of reality, demanding great advancement, but under the understanding that humans born in this age are needed, not simply lucky, to people the new land. Such is to be our solution, which from our vantage point should most likely take the form of an extraplanetary colony. More ideal, of course, would be our learning of greater humility as a species, but for this we will need to mature more first. There may be ways around the perception of parenthood as altruism, such that decadence does not kick in at all and we can populate a limited space without growing careless about what is outside of that space. We might, for example, change our perception of God, emphasizing that He knows our gifts and will place those who surrender to Him where they are needed, having Him, in a sense, replace our parents who seem to suffer from indifference. We might partition society, making our prosperity more fragile and the need for every person's talent to be involved more clear. That particular solution might sound nationalistic, given how, for us, it implies a departure from the global order in favor of more local ones. But this isn't the violent option discussed before. If we all agree, as humans, to try our own things and not manifest ourselves as a single community, then we become each other's reality check, so to say. And no one needs to go into overdrive to prove that there is a world outside of this single community, which they are suffocated by. From an individualist paradigm, you might argue that we have this already, But when every city in the world looks pretty much the same and there is such a high degree of interdependence, meeting a foreign individual really isn't all that likely to broaden your scope. We might, similarly, remove from our current very urbanized way of life back into more rural environments, with small communities where what we do is for the benefit of other people with faces, rather than that of a corporation or of the economy. Other solutions or courses to avoid some of our current problems may be out there too. I may make a separate video about them later on. Let me know if that's something you would like to see.